15,000 watts of power.
Hello everyone and welcome to a very, very special episode of One More Thing. It's a while since we've done one of these massive Zoom calls, but it is a very, very special occasion for us to be doing it right now. We are about to find out about the longest running drum and bass broadcast in the world, I believe. Somebody could come and test me on that. 30 years strong, The Prophecy 89.5. Guys, I'm joined, let me introduce everybody before we get into the conversation. I'm here with Valiant MC, I'm here with Marcus Visionary, I'm here with T.R.A.C, and I'm here with Mr. Brown. Hello, guys. How are you all doing?
What's going on, man?
Yeah. Good.
We're happy you're here, Dave.
Yes. Brilliant. I'm happy that you're all here. And let's get some history. Let's get some proper Toronto, North American drum and bass history. Marcus, Take us back to the source.
Well, basically, I mean, we had a warehouse scene like in the late 80s, and we would attend all those warehouse parties. And then from the warehouse parties, around 1990-91, all the bleep techno started coming in. But we had a couple of really key figures here, which was Malik X, Dr. No, and Mark Oliver. And they're all, Mark Oliver's from Scotland, and Malik X and Dr. No are British expats. So then there was the Exodus crew, and they were all from Scotland. So we've had a big British contingent of people here that sort of laid the foundation. But on top of that, Detroit is 4 hours away, and our warehouse scene was really good. Acid was sort of part of we didn't have the acid explosion you guys had, but basically once bleep techno came in, like Warp Records stuff, our rave scene really started to, by 1991, we had developed a rave scene. We had Exodus and Nitrous and Chemistry and all these incredible companies. I launched a company called Delirium in 1992. We had guys like Pleasure Force and, so many companies, Infinity, Psychosis, right? And I was talking to Uncle Doug's about this, and he couldn't believe it because when I was bringing up the names, he was like, we had a Pleasure Force, we had a Delirium, he couldn't believe it, right? So nice. Our scenes really did mirror, and we had a really healthy 18-year run from 91 all the way till dubstep hit in 2008. It was just, Toronto was arguably, actually I would say it was the biggest city for British bass culture music, and we weren't trying to do the Canadian, we weren't like Canadian DMB. No, it was, we pushed British drum and bass. We were just contributing to that, contributing to jungle, contributing to hardcore. And I think that's one of the biggest differences between Canada and the US. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, man, it's been a really amazing run, and to see things picking up again recently, it's so healthy,
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it is really interesting. I mean, whenever I speak to any of the pioneers, people like Jumping Jack Frost, Ray Keefe, Fantasy, Goldie, anybody, they will talk about Toronto during those early years. And I mean, there's enough footage of it around as well on YouTube and things like that. It was, by and large, it was either Germany or Toronto would be the first kind of overseas international booking that most of the pioneers really got in that type of way. You just got it, really. And understanding the expat community, it kind of makes sense. There was a real clear link. You were getting it direct from the source.
Yeah, and I think we were a hop over point, a lot of the times, because, the guys were always fascinated with going to New York, going to LA. And so Toronto was sort of like, oh, let's jump over to Toronto. And then, and we ended up becoming that. So guys like, I met Frost in 1992, Goldie, same thing, Fantasy. These were guys that were coming over regularly for the next however many years. Even all of the MCs, sometimes they were literally coming every other month. Fantasy, Fearless lived here for a little while. GQ was here on a regular basis. So, yeah, man, we have a long, amazing history that I hope we can all tell at one point, because we're getting old.
So I mean, where else does kind of James, when did you come into the scene? Mr. Brown, I should use your official title, sorry, but when did you come into the scene? You were a few years later.
Could probably correct me, but I believe it was 2010 when you moved on. I'm not 100% sure. I was just trying to figure that out earlier.
I think he was saying when did you
I'm on about the scene. Yeah.
The scene. Oh,
yeah,
geez, probably. Oh, My God. Okay, so I started probably in 93 myself. So I was from a completely different community. I was listening to like industrial goth, Depeche Mode, all that stuff. You know what I mean? So when I got into it, it was definitely eye opening in terms of what I was used to seeing going out to clubs and whatnot. But Marcus was one of the first people that I met. And I think that was in 96. I'm not sure. I have to check these dates out here. But yeah, it was after meeting him, I remember this was just something I wanted to be part of. It was because I was like a relatively new DJ. I didn't grow up with the heads above me there. I just sort of kind of came along afterwards and tried to learn and absorb as much as I could, mostly from Marcus and a few of the other guys in the scene. Mystical Influence, Sniper. These are guys that kind of helped me sort of come to to understanding how things worked. And yeah, it was I think it was 2010 when I joined the show. I was before that though. I was answering the phone for any prophecy phone calls, any requests, any big ups, any random calls that Marcus was getting.
Oh,
I was
wow.
delegated to answering the phones and passing those messages along. So I did that for the first little bit, actually.
Right. I mean, you were involved
Yeah.
though. You were also running church as well. You were also contributing to the scene
Oh,
as one of the
I
longest
had
running nights as well, weren't you?
yeah, I had a few companies actually. I think the longest one I was running
Yeah, you did.
was Soul in Motion.
Yeah.
The Soul in
Right.
Motion. Yeah, that was
Canadian Soul in
2000.
Motion.
Yeah.
The Can-
The
I
original
didn't
Soul
want.
in
I
Motion.
didn't want to
Yeah.
say it. I didn't want to say it. But
Wow.
Love you,
yeah, I think it was
Bailey.
2000. Yes, big up Bailey. That was 2002. So between 2002, I was doing church. I was doing. Oh my God, I was working for Theory events. I was working with Destiny for a while. Marcus and myself were doing many events.
We have too many. Yeah.
We have too many different companies we were doing shows under,
Yeah.
and eventually, Church Sundays was probably one of the longest weeklies I ran for a bit. I started it with Rick Toxic, and I think we went for about 3 or 4 years, and it ended right around the pandemic. I connected with Jamal over in San Francisco, and
Stamina.
he's doing Stamina. So we did a church by Church X Stamina streams, and it was like these streams that we were doing
Wow.
for COVID while people were home doing nothing, just trying to cheer them up. So it was their DJs and our DJs, and it was like a 12-hour thing that we ran. It was a lot of work, but had to keep the music going during that time.
Yeah,
So
you really
Prophecy
did.
has always been, sort of like the anchor, the where everything kind of, comes out of. And so
Brilliant.
yeah.
Definitely.
Cool, Valiant.
Oh, you know what? Oh, sorry. I was going to say, James, don't forget we did Junglist Movement for so many years together.
Oh my
Oh,
God!
yes.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes. How could we
Junglist
forget that
movement.
one?
We did that for about what 9 years or 10 years? We did that.
And then
Oh,
there
it
was
was a long
Massive,
time.
I mean, there's so many
Well,
parties, but yeah, for sure.
we did
Anyways,
lots.
Compound,
Yeah.
baby.
sorry, Valiant.
Compound. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I was gonna say over the time after Marcus when he split, I had a few other hosts coming in. Gremlins and I believe Prime were already part of the show. Marcus had brought them in, and afterwards I brought in Scott Free, and Stranger, Schematic, and then the current crew as we have it right now, which are
Cool.
great.
Brilliant. We're going to
Yeah.
get to the prophecy in a minute. Valiant, I want
Oh,
your
sorry.
Toronto story.
Well, I grew up in Buffalo in the States, and that's a border town. We're right on the border, like right near Niagara Falls. So I started going to raves in 94. I got introduced to that when I started going to university, and the New York City kids at the university, a lot of New York City kids came to school at the University of Buffalo. So I got introduced to it through there, and then some New York City kids started throwing raves in Buffalo. But the following year is when I got into jungle hard, and everything else kind of faded away after that. For me anyway. I would still go out to other nights or whatever, but like it was jungle had my heart. I started emceeing on the radio in Buffalo in I think it was 98. So that's where I cut my teeth. I didn't cut my teeth at raves. I cut my teeth in the radio, which is trial by fire.
Right. Yeah.
So big up to Cable and the Concept, Stevie Washington. Those are the guys that were running the show. Dan Rattel. I started getting some gigs in Toronto every now and then in like the early 2000s. And at that time, I was resident for the big Drum and Bass Weekly in Buffalo return, and then another one after that at the Opium Lounge. And that's where I met James. And I think I want to say 2005.
It was that Groove Rider show.
I think it was the Groove Rider show, yeah.
I think it was 2005. I think you're right.
Yeah. So that's the first time I emceed for James. And we just kind of became friends after that. A couple years later, I actually moved out to Las Vegas. I took about, I think, 5 years off of drum and bass altogether. Like I just kind of dropped out. I was burned out.
Yeah.
And I decided when I came back, after I moved back to Buffalo, I decided I was gonna make tunes. I was strictly gonna be a studio MC, you know what I mean? But I quickly kind of got into podcasting. In fact, I had the vocal podcast. It was on the same time slot that Marcus's Cool London show was on. So it was a little full circle there for a second. We're on Fridays at what was it, 10 or 11, I think, or Thursdays. I can't remember now. An event like pretty soon after that, I started doing Roti and Poutine with T.R.A.C and Armani Rain. I got to know those guys. I interviewed both of them for my podcast. We did USA car bars together, even though I'd been living in Canada by this point for a couple of years. I was still made my name in America. So we started doing Roti and Poutine from there. And soon after that, James was like, hey, I kind of need to bring somebody else into the show. Why don't you join the show? So I did. I don't know, I think maybe it was like a year or two after that. I want to say like 2 years after that is when we brought T.R.A.C on board. And that was a couple of years ago now.
Right. Because when you'd only just moved to Toronto when we did our podcast a couple of years ago, pretty much. Oh, was it? No, it was only a year ago. I think, it would have been like 14, 15 months ago, right? At the start of last year. And I think you'd moved over to Toronto maybe 6 months before then, something like that. You're a newbie in this whole picture, aren't you?
Back when I first started the prophecy, Dave.
Yeah, but T.R.A.C, you lived in Toronto for a while previously. So
I have family up here, right? So it was always good to come and check family, but I was always rooted a little bit into the scene, so to speak, hip hop and drum and bass. So, prior to really getting into the whole drum and bass scene, it was the hip hop scene with Citizen Kane and a few other cats, and then eventually one of the first people I met was Caddy Cat, which is an MC up here, legendary MC as well, and he was the first guy to pretty much bring me into the world of drum and bass up here. And I saw a whole nother side of the music that was super inspiring off top, just because of the energy and everything. I think my first big one was Andy C and GQ at Government. That was an amazing. This is me seeing it full scale, because in New York we always saw it in medium-sized clubs, ripped out and everything. But to see it as full thing, big stage, concert-sized crowds, it was immense to my, and me on the corner of the stage watching GQ and Andy rip it down in fear that I could never get to that level of niceness. So,
Wow,
Toronto played a huge impact on me.
So real
as another American, I gotta say, the dichotomy between Toronto and the States is real different. The drum and bass that came into the States way back in the beginning, it was very the metalhead side of things. T.R.A.C was huge. T.R.A.C, I think, lived in Philadelphia for a while, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
That harder neuro tech step, futurist sound kind of took over, but big raves were not the thing necessarily. Especially a lot of people equate New York City with being this massive scene, but drum and bass lived in the clubs a lot, and then some raves and stuff like that. It was kind of like that, outside the Northeast, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC, Boston. It was weird. It was scattershot up until you got out to California. So when getting to a rave in Toronto, I remember seeing Doc Scott and Justice in Toronto, and it was just incredible, because it was 2,000 people in that room. You know what I mean? So
Go on. I was going to ask what the difference is, or if there was one particular thing that you could put your finger on and say, that's Toronto and that's North America, or that's Canada and that's America, and maybe that's what it is, because that's what I've always associated raves in America, mainland America, as like the Candy Kids and stuff like that, and the kind of precursor to EDM in a way, really, and the kind of more mainstream side of things, and that drum and bass has always just lived in these tiny little, real, super loyal, super dedicated pockets, but never really broke out into those massive raves until relatively recently, until the whole genre has kind of gone a bit more mainstream, I guess, really.
Well, I think that's part of it too. The States, a lot of people call refer to the States as as a separate scene, but it's not. And in fact, T.R.A.C, I think we were on a Roti and Poutine interview, and I can't remember who said it, but I want to say it's Quadrant who said it.
Okay.
It's not one scene. It's like 30 scenes. And yes, they're all so far apart from each other. It's very difficult to
bring
country
though,
unity
right?
to it.
America is a huge country. So, we was happy. That's right. And I remember bringing up the thing that UK heads would like a lot of sales from America. And then when they come, they'll realize that the sales are in pockets. So, 50 may have bought it here, 20 may have bought it here, it might look like 1,000 plus to them in sales. And I'm like, wait, why is these parties small if I'm, so it's a little bit of a way out, because drum and bass has always been treated as an underground thing. It was always the small room in the house and at the house party, you know what I mean? It wasn't too many big. They may have been like Webster Hall, New York City, one of my most favorite places to perform, was like me seeing everything at full scale. And the first time I even touched that stage was because of dubstep, for Christ's sakes. So,
but yeah, that's just it. It was like, so it was going to Toronto and, just huge parties, or even like the clubs themselves were big, and like, it just felt like it was a major thing. And it was like amazing, because it's like, that's the music I love the most. So to see actually, and I think one of the first DJs I ever saw actually might've been Marcus and I think Sniper. And I don't even remember where that was. That was in like 95, 96 somewhere. I can't really remember. Yeah. And it just even in the clubs, I remember going back, I went to back once and it was like mind blowing. You know what I mean? It was just a different vibe. And I think that the UK connection really helped that.
Yeah. I mean, from 1992. So when you're talking about the big parties, if you really want to know, so the raves, like from 92 to 99, the big ones like the Nitrous and the Chemistry and the Pleasure Force, like where you'd get, 1,000 kids plus, So we had that. And then we also had a really healthy club scene. We used to have a place called Magic Mondays. By 99, when they started to clamp down on the raves, because they started to go after us with the legislation and everything moved into the clubs, right? We had a massive, basically I was playing 7 nights a week. James could tell you. You know what I mean? We had Magic Mondays, Jungle Nation on Mondays, Fungal Junk on Tuesdays.
Fungal
Junk. That's right.
Wednesday was System Soundbar. Thursday was Beat Junkie, and what's that place on Front Street? Remember?
Front Street?
Yeah. Oh, I can't remember, but there was 2 Thursdays. No. It was it was in a basement. That was a regular. We played there for 10 years plus.
Oh shit.
Anyways, and then Friday, Saturday would be raves, and Sunday was Milano. So like it went on like that for over a decade. So like when the UK guys would come, they were coming to, and they were playing Wednesday at System Soundbar. They were playing Tuesday night at Turbo. You know what I mean? And then they would be playing Thursday at Beat Junkie. So I think because we had this like 24/7 scene that went on for over a decade, and that's I'm ballparking it, because it's probably more than that. Because the 18-year run, I always stop it at dubstep, because when dubstep hit in 2008, there was a change, and I think what happened was a lot of the older people, they started to get up in their 30s, like because we held on to that 91, 92 crowd all the way up until about 2008, and then they started kind of tap out. Right. A new crowd started to come in and be like, we want our own sound. But even the funny thing about that is Bass Mentality came in, guys. Remember this with the EDM? And dubstep sort of did what it peaked out, like how it did in the United States. And then before you knew it, we were playing at the dubstep nights, drum and bass.
I think the good thing though from that was that a lot of those dubstep kids were like interested by the drum and bass that we were playing, because those
Yeah.
bass mentality nights, it was you, myself. There was a few guys that were playing it. We were bringing drum and bass to these kids, and a few of them stuck around. You know, like some of them moved on, and it was a fad, and
Fast
it
dubstep.
didn't stick. Yeah, faster. Yeah, exactly.
Hashtag of the year right
Exactly.
there.
Shots fired.
But they really
Yeah,
thought it
but
was that. I like that fast dubstep was the thing that they would say.
yeah,
You know?
Yeah.
I thought it was good because they stuck
Yeah.
around, and they helped sort of, I guess, start another generation of the scene. 'Cause
Yeah,
these
and you
kids
do
didn't know
need
the
that.
culture, they didn't know the history, and they were learning it. They were interested in it. So I think it was good and bad,
Yeah.
but
Good
You
and bad,
need
yeah.
that youthful
Good and bad.
energy, really. But the thing that has stuck around throughout all of this, throughout the highs, the lows, the fast dubstep and the actual dubstep and the drum and bass, most importantly, is the prophecy. So take us back,
Yes.
Marcus, take us back. Can you remember the very first broadcast? Because it's 30 years this year, it was 1994. Can you actually remember the first broadcast, or have they kind of rolled into one big, long, lovely memory?
Well, I don't remember the exact first broadcast because what it is, we started to fill in at a station called 88.1 CKLN. And so CKLN was Ryerson University Radio. And Malik X had Radio London there. And that's why we used to watch Malik X. We used to watch James St. Bass on 89.5. And these were like the rave shows, right? So the thing then was just like, okay, if you get a radio show, you're going to make it. So I went and applied at 88.1. They brought us in and we were doing like just whenever they would put us. And we were young. So they were like 6 to 9 in the morning. We're like, yes, like, you guys, 1 o'clock in the morning till 6 in the morning. Yes, no problem. And so we were really doing slots like that and overnighting it. Like these Medicine Muffin, Jungle PhD, Rough, they're playing dominoes. Dr. No, people are bringing
That's
food
funny.
and just hanging out all night and playing drum and bass and, got
Brilliant.
Lush calling in and bigging up the Mad Rave crew, DJ Lush. So, basically it became like, it really was, because we didn't have anything else. So if you were young, the only way you could hear about rave was through the radio. So it started on 88.1 and how we ended up on 89.5 was a raver called in and said, what are you guys doing on 88.1? Because it has such a small signal. You can move over to 89.5 and it's 15,000 watts. He's like, and so the catchphrase, funny enough, is Barrie to Buffalo, Kitchener to Coburg. That's our catchphrase, right? So we would hit all of those points, and Coburg's like very far east. Buffalo's an hour away, which was a big one for Valiant, right? And yeah. So and Barrie, which is like in the outside of the GTA of Toronto. So I went in, I interviewed with the manager there, and he put us into some fill-in slots. So we started doing like 6 to 9 in the morning. So I would finish at the rave, go sleep on the couch, do 6 to 9 in the morning. And I basically, how I found DJ Shadow, DJ Prime, who was the first DJ, it was just me and him for many years, we would have guests, obviously, like all the boys passed through. But I said, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I need somebody with a really big record collection because I'm not going to be able to do it every week, and Prime had an amazing record collection. Like, so we started doing the show, and then how the guests actually started to happen was, well, for one, everyone wanted to hang out at the station. James will tell you, people, it wasn't hard to be like, you want to come up to the prophet? I'll do the phones. Like it was the place to be. So a lot of people just wanted to come hang out and everybody wanted to play. So, everyone would pass through, Mystical Sniper, Lush, all of our local DJs. And the fill-ins came later because we looked forward to doing it like every week, because there was no internet. So literally imagine having this station. We were the station where it was just like all of our peers were locked in, all of the ravers were locked in, and it was a 1-to-1. You know what I mean? It was basically like how cool was. It was like,
right. And I think that's a good point, Mark. I want to say this before I forget. I think the way the prophecy started, and also my first radio placement for a couple of years on Underground FM in Buffalo, it's the same way. There's no pirates in North America, right? So the closest thing that we have to it is university radio, and so CKLN, and then WBNY in Buffalo. It's kind of the closest you can get to a pirate in a way. because it's like the DJ that has the show is the one that decides what gets played. There's no corporate playlist, nothing like that. We play literally whatever we want. So that is where you found those kind of shows. Even there was a show in Buffalo called The Essential Groove, and even that one, even though that was considered public radio, it was located at the University of Buffalo. So like all that stuff, it was like the closest we could get to pirate radio. I would hear about pirate radio. I every now and then we'd get a pirate tape, and it was just like, oh my God, can you imagine if we had this stuff? And so when I first started hearing the Prophecy, it was like, whoa, these guys are like, I mean, we thought we were doing pretty good on Underground FM, but the Prophecy was like a different thing. And like Marcus like sounded like he just sounded like he'd been doing this for a fucking million years. And like the records were like on point, the mixing was on point. Especially like, if El Natural or Caddy were on the mic at all, it just sounded like a different universe, like the universe we'd been trying to get to forever. And so, UK had the Pirates, we didn't. So University Radio is what helped us establish broadcasting,
Well, so you have to excuse my ignorance on the setup there. Like, what is so you don't have to be studying in university to be able to host the show, obviously, then, but it is a completely independent network where there aren't any kind of stipulations on what you play or anything like that. So you've got the freedom and you can create a culture just like pirate radio in that type of way, that dedication, that pure for the love of music, basically.
There is something though. I mean, we have Canadian content that we have to adhere to. But I remember when I started doing the radio, it was a lot harder to find that music because there weren't as many local producers that were making beats. However, now it's a completely different story, and there's an abundance of people that are making music, and the music that's coming out of this country is it's incredible. And,
exceptional.
Yeah, definitely.
I think now is a good time to pay a little tribute, by the way, to Love Hurts for being so dedicated to Canadian content, drum and bass, and he has recently departed. And
what a
he did a lot for drum and bass in Toronto, and I really respected him for that. So
he was
CCTV.net, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
He hosted on Prophecy for about 2 years, I believe, possibly 3. Yeah,
that's right.
So
that's the first time I met him. Actually, was at the studio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
That's definitely something I liked. I liked with the studio was I would do a lot of studio events where I would have people come in. I'd have potlucks, and the whole idea was just to get people to collaborate with each other, and have and that was going on. Music was being exchanged. People were talking beats, and it was it became. I tried to keep that hub environment going that Marcus had, which was very obvious when you would walk into the studio back in the day. There was many people just sitting around. You know what I mean? So you just wanted to be there, So and try to keep that going.
Keep creating a community.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut in. Before we moved on, I wanted to say, so we're into the 90s. Another great thing that I think really made us what we've become today, and especially in the 90s. So when all the UK guys were over, and they didn't just they would never just come to Toronto for one night. Like now they're in and out. You know what I mean? A lot of the times they're in and out. But then they used to come for like many days and hang out with us, and so it was automatic they were coming on the radio. Like, so we had so many people, you name it, basically everybody came down, and then they would do the radio, and then they would also go play at church, Milano's on King Street. So it was sort of like this thing. It was like, oh, well, we're over anyways. Cause remember, they're getting like grands at the rave, and then nothing for the radio. And then they get maybe a few $100 Canadian, that they can go buy Chinese food with or something after. But, that's one thing that I have to big up about the jungle and drum and bass artists. Like, you have to salute them because they're putting in hours. Like, the guys now, it would be like, oh, well, we need to talk to the management and we need to negotiate how this is all going to work. And you know what I mean?
Let's do brunch.
But it was like a street thing, and like, they were so happy to come down and play. And then, what happened was that it hit the whole GTA, it hit Buffalo, and it really helped our scene. Like that Shy FX Skibadee Fearless show is
classic.
People ask me about it everywhere I go.
The greatest radio episode ever recorded.
It's true. And
I
it's
listened
airing
to it again
Friday.
this afternoon, and you get that kind of sense of cool, like Skibber's reading out the local number and everything. Like there's,
Yes.
you know, and I think that was probably one of the first times where UK people would have been fed back. Like we were at the receiving end of the feedback loop because tapes would always go around and stuff like that, and there would be like, you know, even for me, like 200 miles away from London, getting a tape of a pirate station in Wales was like gold dust, you know. So like thousands of miles for you is even more precious. But to have stuff coming back to us and like really early internet mixes, this was in the mix. Like this, it is world famous, that mix, really, isn't it?
Well, it's funny, you know, I knew that Shy and Skibba and Fearless were playing the AWOL party that weekend, and I was like, I wonder if they'll be on the radio.
I got to
couldn't
ask
go to the
now, is that
party.
the UK touring AWOL or did you have a Canadian AWOL as well?
There was a Canadian one. It
There
run
was a
by,
Canadian one.
There was, yeah, AWOL Canada. I remember that
and like
show.
I tuned in because I was like, oh, you know, I couldn't go to the party, and I was like, I'm not a huge fan of that particular style. I was always more of like a Conrad T.R.A.C kind of guy. But I was like, but man, on the radio, this could be cool. And I remember I had one of those Iowa stereos with the 3-disc changers, right? And it had, you know, the antenna was like the wire. And so I was holding the signal was coming in a little spotty. I'm holding that wire with my arms. And like Skibba's on the mic. And I will never forget this, man. The moment that Fearless walked in, because he joined the show a little bit later, the moment he walked in, all of a sudden the signal cleared up. And I put the antenna down and it was like perfect. And it was like all of us, the tape that I made, all of us listened to that tape incessantly. We knew every word to that tape backwards and forwards. We would even say to each other, hold tight the Marcus. Like it was like, you know what I mean? There was so many catchphrases that came from that show. It became this defining thing. And people don't even realize Skibba was on the show I think 4 times. He was on the show a bunch, and like a lot of like UK MCs and DJs had been on there, but that was like obviously the most high profile one, right? But it was like the one that definitely made like the prophecy, like it's not just the prophecy, it's like the prophecy. And that show was just a moment that I think all of us, I don't think could ever forget.
Can I say one more thing before we move on from that show?
Of course you can.
That was really unique about that. So at 89.5 on that night, so basically obviously Shy's gonna have Full Cycle was doing the thing at the time, so he's Shy, so he had all the Full Cycle dubs on top of, like, you know,
Yes, he did.
Pandora's Box on dub, you know, like he was fully armed, and he came in very cocky, being like, oh, you guys, I'm going to level the building kind of vibe. And then so how CIUT was set up was it was very much like a professional radio station. So you had a mic room, right? And so you had a table and a mic on one side, a mic on the other, and 2 benches. So imagine this. So basically these 2 guys are on benches facing each other face to face. And right from when they came in, like, because remember at the time, like, was kind of like Skibba was the hot. He was like so hot, but Fearless was just like, oh, come on now.
Legend.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I was like, this is going to be a showdown. And the funny thing is, we had a board. So a lot of people don't realize I was on the board just making sure the levels were perfect and throwing in the crowds. You know, remember the crowd noise?
Yeah.
We had a crowd noise
like
on
all
the car.
clapping and stuff.
Yeah, so because we didn't want to really rewind or anything during the show, we just let them go, right? So I'll tell you, I'll never forget just these 2 guys. These 2, if you think about it, like giants sitting there and really just giving their best to each other. You know what I mean? And I think that's the magic of that show. And I think people really caught that because, you know, with Pirates, it's like you're holding the mic. You know, they weren't holding a mic. They had their hands on their legs, and they were just. It was almost like a boxing match. You know?
Wow.
That's so crazy.
Wow.
You know, it's
Anyways.
funny. I think T.R.A.C will probably agree with me on this one. I think one of the things. By the way, let me just remind people: Skibadee himself said that show was one of his 2 best sets of his life. He said that on
really?
Instagram Live. Yeah.
Wow.
So, like, that's a testament to how good that set was. But I think T.R.A.C will agree. As another MC, they were both. You know, it wasn't a rave. They didn't need to shout at all to be heard. They were both relaxed. Their voices were relaxed.
Oh, that
and they were like
pouring.
they could go all
They were
out
pouring,
without
yep.
going all out lung wise. And because of that, they both were slipping into these like flows that you don't normally hear at a rave. They were digging into their bag of rhymes. It was just like the purity of the moment for an MC. It was awesome.
So what kind of caused that to happen the way it happened? Was it just the energy of wanting to be there? Or was it just like, something else,
You know what? We would always ask everyone. Like, hey, do you want to come down? And it was always like crossing your fingers whether or not, you know what I mean? But when, like, really, I think it just came down to, at the time, like, I don't think I could get shy down there now. We still know each other. And it's different. But then it was just the hunger that they had. They were so excited to be coming to Toronto at that time. Like, now it's really changed because of the pound to the dollar. Like, sometimes it's hard to get like the older school guys to come over. Like, now that's what's changed, because it's like, really, they're not really going to be making much money when they come over, and so they like to attach it to a tour. So, but back then, all those guys were young and super hungry, and it was such a status thing to come over and smash Toronto, have a big rave in Toronto. And then they went back and, like, there was 10,000 people there, but there was 2,000 or 1,500. You know what I mean? So, but it was good for us, because everyone was like, oh, there's 10,000 people at the rave in Toronto. But actually, you know what? I have to take that back a little bit, because we did go through that period where we had 14,000 regularly at the exhibition through Cyrus and Life Force, and we had many years of that, and that's what caused the clampdown. We had 7,000 people in the drum and bass room, 7,000 people in the house room, and it really got that big by 99. We had that big outdoor rave where our mayor basically said, we have to stop this, and they legislated it right into the ground and pushed. Basically all of the rave promoters bought clubs. They bought clubs, and it was our main, or they made deals with nightclubs that existed, pushed it into those clubs. Then all of the UK DJs just there was no stop. It was like, from the big outdoor things, because what was it? I think, was it 20,000 people at the outdoor Cyrus? Remember that?
I heard it was something like that.
Was that the honeypot?
No, it was down at the docks. It was down at the docks, and it was out of control, basically, because at that point, now they don't have control. They probably had enough people, room for like 13,000 or something. And then all of these kids descend on it. And you can imagine the traffic jams. And
we had heard that party was just insane.
I think
down here.
Yeah, I think
they're down in Buffalo. Down here, I'm not even in Buffalo anymore.
That was the Cyrus party?
Yeah, I think that's the one that caused them to be like, okay, we need to stop this. Also, to the amount of drug use that was happening at the CNE events. We had a place called the Canadian National Exhibition, and it's got like these massive what do you guys call them? Like, where they have, I mean, these rooms are huge. They could fit 7,000 each, if you can imagine.
Like an exhibition center type of things, like, basically massive, massive cavernous.
Yeah. It's still there, but you can't go and rent it for a rave. But they were making regular money. All the big raves were there at the time. Remember, we had Eminem, we had Public Enemy, Run DMC, at raves.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that.
Alongside Hype and
Souls of Mischief played one, I think. I mean, it was insane. Like, it was weird. See, like De La Soul was at one. Like, that was an interesting time for jungle in Toronto. I remember that. And you weren't getting that anywhere else. No, like, you got that maybe in New York or DC. That's about it.
And we had some proper raves. I'm not going to stand up for New York for 2 seconds now. Most of those cats came out, like, Nassau in New York was an amazing space. That was our Bloom Center of sorts. But a lot of those guys did frequent into this. It just wasn't. Toronto was just next level with it, and that's just the truth. You know what I mean? The only place that comes close in the States probably is LA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for the most part, Toronto is rich with culture, and it's something to be proud of, guys. Yes, for sure.
Brilliant. Yeah. Back to the prophecy. What other memories really stand out to you, Marcus, from those kind of early years? Well, from the 20 years where you were developing this, but are there any real kind of standout memories besides, like, kind of really famous shows like Skibber and Fearless and Shy?
Well, really, actually, I have to say it's like the guests, because it's like SS, Bailey, boy, I mean, it's just so many guys passed through, and I don't know, it was a magical time. I think mainly because I knew everyone was watching, everyone was, you know what I mean? That was it. It was like, and people would record it. There was a guy who used to sell the tapes. Do you remember the guy that was upstairs on Queen Street? He would like
Oh,
record.
Cloud9.
Yeah, Cloud9. He would record
That
like the
guy.
Shy FX show and then sell it for $10. And yeah, so we used
Didn't
to get
Sniper go
pool
in there
tapes.
one night? Sniper went in there and was going to break his arms when he couldn't stop doing that.
Sounds like Sniper. Yeah.
I gotta say, as at the time being in Buffalo and listening as just a fan, I honestly, for the most part, enjoyed the locals the most. Like El Natural, I mean, people say every time El Natural comes up in conversation with anyone I ever talk to, they're just like, "How can we get him back on the mic? How can we get him to return?" Because he was that good. And Caddy, like he had a very distinctive voice, and the two of them together when they would MC together, it was incredible. And honestly, like, just hearing the locals to me was my favorite part. I was so impressed by what Toronto had locally that it was like, you legitimately got the feeling that anything that London had could be rivaled by what Toronto could have, the potential that Toronto had. And
Brilliant.
as a fan, it was just, those were my favorite shows.
You know what? Going to the locals, like Dave, like basically James can tell you, and Mystical Lush, our goal as DJs, we were like trying to rinse out the UK guys. That was our, like, if we went, if we were at Turbo, and I was a cocky little kid, so I was just like, all right, I'm listening, and then I'm like, I'm gonna thump him down tonight, and that was
Yes.
and that was the goal. We had that really, and we were really competitive amongst ourselves, like me, Mystical Lush. Sniper was playing the Bookham sound more so at that time. He wasn't taking those main rave sets, but we were very competitive. So when we would go in there, sometimes it wouldn't even be a matter of like, oh, did so and so. It would be like, you took the night tonight, and we would know, like, we would be like, okay, it wasn't me tonight, you did it, like. And so curating the music, we were really about keeping it as current and about what was going on in the UK at the time. So all the waves that happened, like whether it was like Full Cycle, V, then Ram, then everything, Bad Company, like as everything came in, we were maturing with it. And we it's only till the EDM came in that Brad and I were like, it's finally happened. This is not for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for many years, like basically for that 18 years, like every sound that came in, we had a really big liquid funk scene here. And at Milano, James, so many nights, from Sex and the City to liquid funk at Milano, like so many. But James, he was a big part of that too. But yeah, like every sound, every the Dubwise sound when that happened, and so everything, man. And then also too, I wanted to say, guys, I don't want to leave out, on top of having a really powerful drum and bass scene, we have always, for the entire time up until now, had an underground jungle scene. So we're gonna big up Drumcraft, Gremlins, Rumbleton, all these guys, because the underground jungle it's sort of a separate, quiet scene that's been going from the very inception all the way till now, and it's kind of like, the ant versus the Goliath of drum and bass, and and so we throw jungle parties that are just specifically jungle parties. Like James has Roadblock, we had Junglist Movement, Wax, all these different things, different party names. Right now there's Drumcraft, and so jungle has been kind of separate in a way, but still part of it. I don't know if it's the same in the UK.
Yeah, kind of. But yeah, no, it is definitely like you've got the long kind of standing nights, which like Rupture and stuff. When you mentioned Rumbleton, then I started thinking of Rupture. But there is a definite difference. There's a lot of crossover on lineups and stuff like that. There hasn't been, but there are very specific dedicated nights which have been running for a very long time. But again, not as long as like North America, and when I first started speaking to quite a few of you, especially you, Mr. Brown, before the lockdown, I was fascinated by these long running nights, like Respect. And I know I'm gonna forget the name of the night in Boston now, because I think that is the longest running one. Oh, put me out of my misery. What's the one in Boston? The long running night.
I thought Drum and Bass
Element,
Tuesdays in Seattle was the longest running.
Elements.
Elements, yeah,
Was
Drum
Element?
and Bass
Okay.
Tuesdays as well. But all, I mean, they're longer. They're longer running. They're more consistent than anything we've ever had in the UK. You know, and that fascinates me. And I think it's because it was, you know, it's such a sprawling landmass, and it's so underground that these cultures could be developed in isolation and not affected or diluted by anything else for throughout the entire 90s and most of the 2000s. And then, you know, the people who are kind of still running them now are the real kind of, you know, those dedicated souls, and people like that really inspire me. And you know, we have had it in the UK, but nowhere near as much because it's just always been there. It's been so abundant. But I think it's special,
Right.
even in Toronto, where the culture has been so strong, because you guys have valued it in a different way, I think, maybe, or maybe it is because, again, Toronto, you know, you have a lot more space, like physically, and I think the psychology of that has created a different culture for you guys. Like, you know, we're on top of each other. That's why why we're able to do pirates and stuff, because we're all just lumped on this tiny little island, so there's no avoiding it. Whereas you can go and do your own thing, or it always feels like, from my perspective, looking over the Atlantic to either America or Canada, you have more space. And I think that's a special ingredient, which is yeah, which we, you know, it hasn't really been documented or understood because you guys are so used to the amount of space, if you know what I mean.
Right. You know, I want to say, like, before we like leave the 90s and everything, I got a big respect to Sniper and Mystical, because they had their own radio show. I believe that Medicine Muffin had his own radio show. There was like multiple radio shows on in the 90s. And if you go to jungletapes.com, you can hear a bunch of them. But like, the Prophecy was always kind of like the mothership. And the other one, I mean, like, you know, the Vinyl Syndicate, you know, their show was I didn't they actually take over the Prophecy one night once when you guys
We had them down several times, but you know what? I used to go play for them. They played for me. It was Renegade Radio.
Renegade
that's
Radio.
right.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
I was like
and
brain
then
farting right there.
Medicine Muffin. So when we went to 89.5, Medicine Muffin went to 88.1, because at that point, because basically he was coming in, and the whole time I was at 88.1, he was there with us. So so he was like, you know what, you know, but you know, Muffin, I feel like going out tonight. So he wasn't like the guy that you'd be like, let's leave the show in Muffin's hands. You know what I mean? They would be calling you and say, "Oh yeah, he's not here right now," and these things happen. You know what I mean? Like, so he was that guy, right? But then basically, once he started the Rinse Out show, which was a really popular show, he started having a whole bunch of different guests and so on. I got to big up the Hard Crew, Medicine Muffin, Jungle PhD, RIP,
Definitely.
Roughneck. Those were the original guys over
Right.
at 88.1 before we moved to 89.5. So big salute.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. What were the changes then over the kind of years that you faced? Because the beauty of radio is that it's remained timeless, and that intimacy, that voice, that feeling like somebody's speaking directly to you. Doesn't matter how far we move on with technology and how connected we all feel, but we're not. Radio has got that special factor to it that no other medium has. And it's no coincidence that podcasts and radio really took off again during lockdown, and, you know, kind of things like streams are an extension of that, really, in a way. But what were the kind of challenges after that real sweet spot, those 10 years of the 90s and the early 2000s, that besides the changing you know, kind of sound and the new generation and dubstep coming through, what were the challenges that faced the Prophecy as it matured?
I would say because it's publicly funded, the fundraisers got a little bit more difficult. So we do these fundraisings. We used to do them once a year, and then they started them twice a year. And there was a time where James and I were doing them. Remember James? And I remember specifically James was come down, and it was tough. We were doing them twice a year, so they made them from once a year. And basically, what you're doing is you're begging for money. You're begging, and it was always under the threat of, well, you know what? If you don't make your quota, you could lose your show. And eventually, it was great because we realized that's one thing. The listeners were there, like, so that was a big change, because remember, now you have internet and you have all these other options, but we still managed to always not only just make our quota, but go over. Like
Yeah.
I don't know how once I handed it off to you guys, how it's been with the fundraising. But
Oh, it's maintained its level of, like the people who were contributing. There was a lot of like loyal people who were still doing it, and we haven't had any phone calls from the station yet saying, "Hey, you guys need to like, pull up your socks," because it's been there. There's a lot of challenges doing community radio, between having gear, whether it's there or not, or whether it's working or not, and just the politics of doing community radio. There's been a lot of challenges, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I
I would think that maybe
think
one challenge could be considered our the time slot change a couple years back.
that's a
Like,
funny one because we you're right. We moved over to Friday nights, and there's been discussion about moving again, but
because it was
we
on
aren't
Sunday nights for
100%.
so many years,
Yeah,
and
it was
people were like,
eight.
Friday nights, what are you doing? But we're like, but at the same time, the station's data shows that a lot of people listen on Friday nights too. So it's
Yeah,
kind of like, my thinking was like, well, it could be good because if you're getting ready to go out, it'll get you pumped up for the night that you're going out to.
yeah.
That kind of thing. So it's like kind of like we weren't sure if it's a challenge or not yet. It's weird to see. And then everything's on demand anyway. Like, does it really matter what time it's on? I don't know. It's an interesting conundrum.
That's another problem is having the shows archived in a timely manner. We have a fellow who listens, and he's been archiving it for us. But in terms of waiting for the station to put things up in a timely manner, it's just sometimes we have challenges with that because if you have a guest and you want to, people miss the show, you want to be able to say, hey, it streams tomorrow, but sometimes it doesn't always. So again, it's just dealing with the
That
politics, I guess.
sounds
And
that sounds very comparable to so many different organizations and structures within any creative industries where
yeah,
budgets are tight. There's minimal resources, and a lot of people are doing it out of passion whenever you get down to the community side of things. And I'm really interested, Marcus, when you left then to join Cool, and you were one of the only few, you and Lion Dub, I think, are one of the only few like the first international hosts to join the Cool family. Eastman was incredibly picky on who he would have on the show and who he would give that responsibility to. But what was that like when then you kind of went over to a station which you kind of modeled a lot of, or there was a lot of parallels between the Prophecy and Cool? What was that like? And yeah, how did you find it?
Like, it's no secret I've been championing the jungle sound, especially the reggae jungle sound, for so many years. And so when I would go on tour, I would go over, and it was almost like, oh, I gotta play on Cool. Like, and there was so many DJs, so it wasn't hard to really go and somebody be like, oh, Rio Sky or Lion Dub, or you know what I mean. And when I'd go down, because Eastman loves reggae so much, he loves that Ragga Jungle thing, he would come down often, and we'd go out for food and hang out. And I think they just because their love for sound system culture was so deep. Like, I would invite MCs down, like all the guys like Ragged Twins or Navi or David Buma, Yush, R.I.P. And
RIP.
so we'd all be hanging out, and sometimes they would even be like, oh, you know what, we only see each other when you come down, Marcus, like, because London can be like that sometimes. And so we'd have these magical moments. And yeah, it was really just the love for reggae music, and he knew that I had that love for sound system culture, because like I always try to keep that connection between jungle drum and bass and sound system culture. That's my thing, Mary, and I think East knows that. We kind of both fight for that, right? Like, he just built his sound system, and I think it's no secret that East has always like tried to really keep the connection of sound system culture and Cool, and be like,
Massively.
hey guys, you guys have to remember where all these MCs, the rewinds, the dub plates, like he's really keen on that. And I think he picked up on that with me and with Lined Up. So we were lucky enough to really, and then really truly, like, even now, like, we spoke briefly on the email, and he was just like, keep doing your thing, like, keep delivering quality shows and you'll be all right. So, because not everybody made it onto the new Cool, right? So I was very happy about that.
A lot of people, and they couldn't, it was impossible when they made that changeover. They wouldn't be able to keep all of the old roster and stuff. And it's great to see that it's got a new legacy and got a new lease of life. And I think you're absolutely right. So much of this stems down to having a sound and that craftsmanship, and that, like, when I speak to Eastman about his sound, the importance of having your own sound, having control over that. Everything that Cool is based on that sound system culture that he was part of, in the original foundations of jungle music, essentially, really blues parties, and that Windrush generation that really changed UK culture forever. That's where, when he talks about raving, he's talking about going to blues parties in the 70s, but he's talking about exactly the same thing. Like, my generation thought we owned raving. No, people 20 years older than us, they were raving way better and way harder than we were in their, setting the scene in that type of way, really. But community, regardless of whether it's, yourselves running it now or when you were running it, kind of originally, Marcus, community is at the center of all the best stories in rave culture, really. But community is very much at the center of the prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look at these guys. These guys have built their own community with so many of, like, they have, like, there's Polaris, there's Scott Free, so many of the people that they keep bringing in, where even Samantha Pashel, so many of the guests that they keep doing. So I know that the focus, James, you guys get into it with the community aspect of it. Yeah.
It was one of the things that I try to do with my shows whenever I'm on, is I try to have a guest out, either whether it's a local producer or even a local DJ. I think it's good to have those people have some sort of a platform to have their music out. I just think it creates excitement. Like this past week, I did an all Canadian show to sort of pay respect to Love Hurts, and a lot of the guys were listening in and they just get excited about it. And I think it's good because, when these events are out, people recognize the names, and it keeps pushing everything forward. I always encourage people to come by the station, whether it's to come and hang out and track. You come with me like every time I go in now.
Love the studio. I love radio. Yeah, for sure.
I will say track is a natural on the mic too, man. Like, as a radio host, not as an MC, but as a radio host, he's so good.
Immediately.
Man. I agree. He's like,
I agree.
This has been your career, your whole life. What are you doing? You know what I mean? He's like a natural. I take this like whole AM radio DJ, like, how you doing? Like thing, like approach to it. Because I don't talk. I try not to talk a lot. I play all vocal tunes. But like, man, when track gets on, I was like, man, I wish I sounded like that. You know what I mean?
Come
on. I think all of us, though, now that there's now 6 hosts. So when I joined, it became me, Polaris, Mr. Brown, and Scott Free. When Scott Free left the show, he had been on it for a long time. He left the show. So James was like, all right, well, let's bring some other people in. Track had, recently been spending lots of time in Toronto, living there. So we brought him in, and we also brought RMS in. And so between all 6 of us, like every week we're going to... Oh, yes, and D2. Yeah, MC D2. So, 3 of the 6 hosts are MCs. So we tend to push MC culture. But more than that, you have 6 different flavors of drum and bass every single week. I mean, it's these even times where I've interviewed quite a few people on the show, and that can kind of be a little polarizing. So I don't do it all the time. But like, you'll get some interviews in there. Like James has like kind of a patented sort of mix of like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. at the rave kind of sounds. Track, he's got like such an eclectic palette that he plays all sorts of different sounds. RMS, he's got a pretty distinctive sound design of his own anyway. So he plays stuff that's like not only his own, but stuff that's kind of like adjacent to him. Polaris is just in a sonic realm of his own.
Yeah.
D2 kind of the same thing, like Track, like he plays like this great hodgepodge of different things. And so it's kind of like made the show, I don't want to say like unpredictable, but super well-rounded. There's always going to be something for everybody when you listen. So I don't know if you want to talk more about that, what your approach when you play.
I love hearing MCs play as well. My favorite type of MCs, and most MCs are these type of MCs, are super nerdy about their music and they know their beats better than the DJs. And I'm always interested in seeing an MC draw. So yeah, I mean, what is your MO when you come into your show then, Track? What gives you that edge that Valiant was just bigging you up on?
Well, first and foremost, these guys are all right. I'm the kid in Disney World with all the rides to myself.
Ah,
And
brilliant.
I'm happy nobody's here. I'm going to go one by one. Secondly, I've done radio prior to this on Wu-Tang and a few other things, but I've always just like had radio in my brain to like be a part of it. But most importantly for this, especially, is that I actually get to DJ a little bit, So I not only do I get to DJ, I'm already part of a lot of promotional stuff from labels. I get so much music. And one of the most happiest things for me is that I get to play tunes that I actually want to show the world to. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily a personal thing. It's more about, yo, check this out. Yo, check this out. And oh my God. And as much as I am a soulful liquid guy, I understand that I have to at least find something within the other subgenres that I like, that I want to play on my show. And that's just been my healthiest approach. I make jokes, maybe, it's been really fun to I'm stuck in traffic trying to get there on time so I could, me and Mr. Brown, to tell you the infamous first time was me running through the hallways, and then we put in the drive and the drive didn't work. We had 5 minutes left before the show starts, and then somehow we turned 5 minutes into 3, 2, 1. The show was ready and was going.
Made it work. We always made it work, man.
For me, it's just a joy overall to do something like that, especially speaking to communities and getting enthralled into things. I'm really happy with being part of the whole prophecy right now. So yes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's
I mean, have you got any celebrations, like any, kind of events or anything like that to mark 30 years? I know it's a whole year thing, like you're just...
We're in the process of discussing exactly what, when, and who will be involved. So we are actively talking about it. I'm meeting with Marcus tomorrow. Tomorrow we're gonna actually get down to some details, and hopefully we'll definitely have something in the next few months for sure. Just what and where will probably be decided in a couple days.
Ooh,
yeah, we've got like a lot of. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. I was just going to say we have a lot of things actually going. I've been building a studio here to sort of eventually get a Prophecy Sunday stream going on Twitch. We've been working on this for a few months now to try and get like a club ready. It's right next to me. I'm not going to show it to you, but yeah, you've seen the track. You played on it.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we're definitely trying to have a lot of different projects going. We've got a couple. The fundraiser that's coming up it's supposed to be the spring, but it will be the summer one because it got delayed. So there's a few events that I'm working on my own to sort of get that going. So lots happening this year for us, for sure. But the 30 year will be the big milestone. And
you'll hear going forward too, a lot of like anniversary wishes from big DJs and producers and stuff to the show that gets sprinkled in there. We're replaying. Marcus, I don't know if you remember. I don't know if anyone has ever replayed the Shy FX Skibadee Fearless show, but we're replaying it for, we think, maybe the first time this coming.
I don't have any memory of it being played other than it being aired when Mark did it. So I think,
right.
And Mark, you can correct me, but I think this is the first time, this Friday night.
You know what? Yeah, we only replayed some shows because actually this is a funny tidbit. When we did the show with Prime, we used to bring decks in every week. And it was 3 flights of stairs up. 3 flights of stairs.
Yep.
Broken stairs.
Yeah, so there was the odd time where Prime couldn't make it, and that was the only time that we would replay shows. So there's a slight possibility, but not like you guys are gonna mark it, and I mean everyone's gonna tune in, and I mean we already know what that tape's about, so
yeah exactly.
And we occasionally play old classic shows from like the 90s and stuff like that, but this one I think it's the first time we've played it, and it'll be the 26th anniversary of that particular show to the day. We're playing it April 12th, Friday, and it originally broadcast April 12th, 90, was it 99? 98.
99? Yeah.
Sorry, 98. 98. So it'll be,
Wow.
26 years ago on Friday. And so it's like the
Wow.
perfect time to play it. So there's that. The show has won best radio show twice in a row for the Toronto Drum and Bass Awards. There's other guests coming in. I've got a Sweet Pea interview and guest mix coming up soon. And John Rolodex is doing like another one. It's like become an annual tradition. So there's those things that are just going to keep on going. And, we'll see what happens. Because honestly, the show in this era of technology continues to evolve.
Yeah.
So
that's what I was going to kind of sign out with, or begin to wrap up with. It's the future, really. What are your hopes, and what can you tease about? I mean, with something that's kind of timeless and as consistent as radio, it's hard to foresee a different future to what it is, really. It's all whether the audience want to engage with it or not, really. But 30 years strong, stronger than ever, and really, really energized and engaged and inspired by it all. What does the future hold for the Prophecy?
I think No, I don't think so. I've been working with a designer to try and get our logo redone. We've got some events that we're going to do. We've talked about clothing. Valiant had some ideas about action figures. We every once in a while we'll sit down and we'll just brainstorm ideas just to get some things out and see what actually sticks. And there's a lot of stuff coming up actually in the next little while. I think the good thing about having 6 hosts is that nobody gets burnt out from doing it week after week. We all have a significant period of time to curate what shows we want and how we want it to sound. And so it's actually good. So when we sit down and we have some ideas, it's, we've got a lot of stuff cooking. So we're hoping to get together, because we haven't actually done that yet, all of us in the same room at once, and actually get some of these ideas down. But I would say quite a bit. The stream, I'm really looking forward to the stream, because it'll be a platform where we can come in and all the guys, and we'll be able to just, do whatever we want, really and truly, whatever we want, and take our time to do it. No restrictions. So I'm looking forward to that personally.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of like establish the Prophecy as a brand, and then kind of see what sticks. Because obviously, the broadcasting landscape is just continuing to change, and so the Prophecy, we want to stay in radio, but we also want to see what else we can do to stay in people's ears, to stay in people's minds. The history of the show is the history of the show is Toronto, and I feel like Toronto drum and bass without the Prophecy in some form or another just wouldn't be the same. I think that speaks to its the full length of its history, but also the roots of the show. I think Marcus is synonymous with Toronto drum and bass at this point. I think those foundations that were built are just so strong that you have to make sure that they continue to be present long after we're gone.
Yeah,
passing the torch, I think, is really amazing. But I just want to say one thing. Where the Prophecy name came from. I don't know if you guys ever wondered.
No, I never knew this.
You told me this once, but I'm going to let you tell the story.
You know what? And it goes back to the connection with Eastman and the whole sound system culture thing. Because that's what I grew up on. So basically there was a dub track by Fabian called Prophecy. And it was like, it's super famous. Like basically the B line in it is just so infectious. And most sounds, when they play the song, they have this one part where they cut all the tops, and it's just the that part there. So basically everyone does it. Like every sound will do it when they play the Prophecy. But then basically what happened was Hard Crew was playing a jungle techno version, and then basically in jungle there was another version of Prophecy. So it's like it just kept being reborn, and we thought that's a perfect name. And now sitting here with all of you guys, 30 years later, wow. Like, you know what I mean? Yep. Like it's truly a prophecy, you know what I'm saying?
I gotta give you some props too, Marcus. Like when you made that track Prophecy and you released it this past year, and it's got literally the radio drops we have used on air in the track. And I gotta say, I've used it, and I think it's got to be 30 Instagram posts at this point. Like it's like one of those things. It's like it's kind of like helped. definitely. It's
You
kind
know,
of
I
helped
didn't plan that.
immortalize the show.
I just
So-
made the song, and
Really?
I put the drops in, and Brad was like, "I like the tune, I just don't like the drops. Take them all out."
Of course he said.
And I actually said to him, I was like, "No, this is like literally a dedication to the prophecy and just the obscure, distorted drops in there." And if you get a chance to check it out, Dave, check it out. It's out.
I mean, I just gotta say, it is a killer tune.
Yeah.
So like, and every time I hear the 15,000 watts of power, like it's just it's so wicked. It's so good.
That's funny.
Brilliant. No, I'm definitely going to use that. And I think this is a tribute to all of you. And I think it's beautiful, the passing of the torch and being able, Marcus, to sit here and, with everybody else who's running it now and be really proud of that. And not, I think so many times when something is your brainchild and you've created it, to be able to pass it on and then still see it exist, and not, most of the time when you close one door, you close it, whether it's a relationship, a job, even a car. Once you've stopped owning that or being part of your life, then you move on. You have to psychologically take yourself away from it because it encompasses your whole life. But maybe there have been points in the 10 years that have passed since you've left where you haven't been able to be as connected with the prophecy. But for you to be able to sit here and to, and for them to be holding the torch so high, and for there to be that consistency and that, that relationship that you've all got together, I think that's super inspiring. And I think, it's testament to the fact that all of this is a marathon and never, ever, ever a sprint, really, isn't it? This is a lifelong thing, really, whether, you're the founder and you've been part of it for 20 years, or you've come in, more recently like T.R.A.C has. Like, this is lifelong and this is much bigger than any one individual. And I think it's beautiful that you're able to sit here and look back over these 30 years in that type of way.
Wicked.
Definitely.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us too, man.
Yeah,
Amazing.
absolutely.
No, my pleasure.
Also,
And
guys,
thanks for
looking
giving
forward
me...
to another 30 years, man. Let's
Absolutely.
You guys, you know what?
Definitely.
I hope that no matter what we do, and I know because we're all friends and we talk regularly. I hope that actually, I know that it will. Like, if James ever said to me, "You know what? I'm done," I know that he would put it in someone's hands. And because the thing is, now the way that radio is, even if we weren't on 89.5, I said this to James the other day. I said, if you ever lose it, that's nothing. You'll be on the air next week. We will have you on the air. And now,
That's right.
and now,
And then he built the studio.
He's built the studio. So it would be basically, to be honest with you, it could even be a pluck. And then, now we have a station, not just a show.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
I'm really, I want to still salute you guys, Valiant, like T.R.A.C, all the guys, just for doing one thing. These guys have been elevating it, and I watch on Instagram, and I get on in the morning, and it makes me so proud. I'm getting all gushy right now. These guys have elevated it. You know what I mean? And that means the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I agree
same to
with
us,
that.
man. Definitely.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, as a
that's
fan, as grown up, like, I don't want to say growing up. I mean, I discovered drum and bass when I was like 19. So, but I mean, as a a fan of the show for a long time, it's like full circle. When I had my podcast get on Cool for that year and a half, and I was doing the same time slot, just alternating weeks as your show. For me, I like geeked out. I was like, what? Like, I'm on the same time slot as Marcus Visionary. Like, I'm a big fan of the prophecy, blah, blah, blah. And then to come back and join the show. And then I got to interview you on the show. And like, it was just, those full circle moments, like, are the things that mean everything to me.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much, Marcus Visionary, Mr. Brown, T.R.A.C, and Valiant MC for joining me on the One More Thing for this very, very special history lesson. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you to everybody who's watched this as well.
All right. Bless, guys.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. That's amazing.